There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello, BookTube. I'm Sean the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel and another episode of Zooming In, which is a series on my channel where I engage with bookish social media luminaries the world over to talk about bookish literary articles online. And what a treat to welcome Trevor of the Moops and the Gripes podcast and webpage back. Trevor, how are you?
Oh, I'm doing great, Sean. It's always been a pleasure to meet with you. I'm glad that I have been an occasional guest on your BookTube channel. It's so much fun.
You, I'm just delighted to have you back again. We're here to talk about an article that when I saw it, I thought, oh, should I ask Trevor? He's so busy. Oh, it just screams Trevor. This is an article to discuss with Trevor and no one else. It's called This Is Your Brain on Books by Elise Graham, and it was published in late November on a website. It's an online magazine that I had never heard of called Public Books. The link will be in the show notes. If you read up on it, it's a website where they're trying to bring academic thinkers and humanities scholars into the real world, like to for them to share their stuff with everyday readers. And so this was a really interesting article, and I'm going to let Trevor tell us what it's all about. Trevor,
Oh
what
boy.
did you make of this? What did you make of this article?
Well, first off, it was a delight to read because it hit some of my sweet spots. Elise Graham, as you said, is the author. She is talking about two fairly recent books. One
Yes.
is by Christopher de Hamel, and it's called the Manuscripts Club. And she starts by going all the way back to medieval manuscript making and some things that I'd never thought of. I mean, I love reading about this kind of stuff. I love the medieval time period, and I especially love reading about their bookkeeping. And, one of my first really lovely forays into this was, I don't know, 20, 25 years ago, the Simon Cahill book. Oh, what is it? How the Irish Saved Civilization,
Yeah.
about Irish monks making manuscripts. But it's been a long time since I've thought too much about it. And she just starts by talking about how important reading was to the people who could afford these books, and that some of the ways that they made sure that they could remember what they read was by the art that they put on the page, the beautiful inscriptions or engravings or those things that we, think of when we think of medieval manuscripts. That wasn't just for decoration, it was for mnemonic
Uh,
devices.
Mnemonic, that's right. Yeah, I was trying to pull that adjective out of my head and you beat me to it. Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and
Um,
I loved the way that she goes through. I want to read the book. That's how good her writing up of it is.
there was a lot of fascinating stuff in here, but one of the most fascinating paragraphs was just the description of who she writes about this
Hmm.
old affable brotherhood and sisterhood of manuscript lovers. And I'm not going to go through them all, but just briefly going back to the 11th century, going right up to the 20th century, and it was that last one that I thought, oh my God, I need to read this book. Belle de Costa Green, who died in 1950, a personal librarian and collector for the wealthy, who, passing as white in Gilded Age New York, raised the bar for rare book collecting in the United States, curated the collection of the Morgan Library. So that just the people sound fascinating.
And you're right. She in this, I don't know how how many more the book might go, but I like how she calls it a group biography. So I'm assuming
Group
the book
biography.
goes through a lot of these people and tells you about them and their little obsession with collecting and with books. But there is more to this than just book collecting. It is your brain on books and just talking about the ways that people would hold books. And it's, I think something maybe you and I relate to quite a bit by loving the beautiful object of a book, but maybe still not to the extent that these people did, where they might have just one or two treasures that they tried to make it feel beautiful in the hands. Apparently, someone was poisoned because
Yes,
they did more with these books than simply look at the words on the page. They would hold them and smell them, and
Tactile,
yeah.
touch, and smell, and I mean, and so much of that survives in various eccentrics among us, book smellers, book sniffers,
Yeah.
and
Book kissers,
the
book, any of our friends that you know of that are admitted book kissers that could be poisoned if we just put a little bit of poison in the ink.
well, I think you should try this out on Paul.
Paul's not
Um,
with us anymore, folks. He is a book kisser, apparently.
he's in book kissing heaven. My top read of this year that I have submitted a little spiel
Hmm.
for your end of the year program. I did that as a buddy read, and with Joe, my friend Joe, who is as much of a bookaholic as you and I are. And when she was finished, she hugged the book. She loved it that
Hmm.
much. She hugged the
Uh,
book. Yeah, so that's another variation.
I love that this made me think of the different ways that we do interact with books, more than just the text and the ideas. There is a little bit of a pull quote here from inside of the article that says, "Reading shapes the thinking of book lovers that in ways that go beyond merely what they read."
Yes.
And how this stuff shapes our interactions with other people, with the world around us. It made me think of Amina Cain's really great book, A Horse at Night, on writing, which one of my books of the year, where she
Yes.
talks about the physical space and the how reading within a space can, I don't know, just be a part of this beautiful experience that's beyond what you're reading, and almost like entering a state of mind or of thought and reflection. And when you talked to me about collected works, that's kind of what I looked forward to. I don't know a whole lot about the story, but it was about having that time with a treasured book. So,
Absolutely. She introduces some of the themes, some of the ways that this group of wonderful manuscript loving eccentrics have construed themselves
mhm.
as readers. So at the very beginning is something called Lectio Divina,
Mhm.
which is just opening into a religious text to a random page and then studying that page as an act of devotion like prayer. Can you relate to that in any way? Do you do anything
Ugh.
secularly like that?
I don't
I
know. This did
Yeah.
remind me. I mean, I grew up, within a religion, and I know people who would do this, like if they were seeking an answer for something, that would just say, "Well, go and open up the Bible, and whatever you read, that will be God's answer to you." And that never, I'm not, I've never done that per se,
No, but there's
but
something intriguing about it.
but I like how you're tying it into the secular part of it. There are books that I like to dip in, including, I mean, strangely, this isn't just because I was just thinking about it, but Amina Cain's book. It is
Oh,
an
that
almost a little a little thing that I can pull open and just read a little passage, and it puts me in a certain frame of mind where I'm open, I'm excited and invested in reading, and I don't know, maybe that's the closest thing, kind of
yeah.
a transcendent state of mind. I don't know.
Eh, I can kind of relate to that. For years, I accumulated books and didn't read very much. And so I had a library that was probably, 90% unread books. And I used to pull books off the shelf and just open them, but I wasn't looking
Hmm.
for a message from the universe. But I know once, I remember very distinctly once that I got one. And unfortunately, I can't quote the line. I remember it, but I'm not going to quote it because it's a little bit crude. But it was a line that spoke to me so deeply about my life as a young gay man at that time and it was just profound. And I just happened to be the book open to that page, and I still haven't ever read the novel, but it did speak to me. So yeah, there's
I,
you can go from the sacred to the profane with this kind of stuff, Trevor.
and to me, it's about that frame of mind again. I mean, as I read the article, it just made me think of how much we treasure the ability to sit down with someone who's not in the room with you. Sit down by yourself and still be open to so much out there. have things communicated to you in a way that you weren't expecting, and hopefully, and beyond enriching your life, potentially giving shape to it. And I can think back on many books that have probably changed who I am fundamentally, even though maybe I can't remember all the text. Just the reading of them and sitting down with them and spending that time reflecting and thinking has changed who I would be otherwise. Being a reader has changed me, and not just because of the information.
Absolutely. She describes the focus of this book, the Manuscripts Club, as a focus on the community of readers. And so another example that I loved was at the particular abbey, one of the monks would read a book aloud while the others ate and listened.
Oh, yeah.
Why don't we have that in our modern lives? I guess we have it in the form of an audiobook, but to me, I would enjoy nothing better than to sit around the table communing with the people I'm breaking bread with, while having one of them read to me.
Well, and I do have some special experiences with that. I read to my kids all the time, and even the oldest, who's 17, doesn't complain. And they're not doing other things, but they come into the room, oftentimes it's later on in the day, and they're sitting there listening to a story, and then we talk about it. And we've been doing this for years, and I really think it means something to them and to me. And again, it's beyond the story. It's that special time. And I read to my wife as well. We've been reading Jane Austen's Emma for some time. We've read all the other ones. We're on Emma now, except we still have Pride and Prejudice, which we've read them all before, but we decided to do it this way. And I don't know, it opens up that storytelling, and that it's a completely different frame of mind than sitting down to watch a movie, which I still love to do with somebody. But yeah, there is something about sitting and being able to read aloud or be read to by someone else that, I don't know. This is interesting. I had thoughts before we sat down, but you have stretched me and made me realize there's a lot more to where this has made me think than what I was able to articulate to myself before we sat down, Sean.
well, but I'm just bouncing off your radiance because I didn't have anything prepared really. I did want to kind of talk about some of these things, but yes, we're so good together, Trevor.
Should do this all the time.
Yes, I had an incredible experience of cementing a friendship. We were friends, but after this dear friend had her second concussion in 3 years at the age of around 60 and couldn't read again for several weeks, I started reading to her on Voxer, which is a free voice messaging app. I was living in Japan at that time, and she was in Canada. And I read to her every night for an hour. And then we discussed what I'd read to her, and it just made us the best of friends, that process that went on for about 6 weeks. So
that's awesome.
Very, very memorable.
And a beautiful way to, like you said, kind of commune and with someone else.
Deepen a friendship. Absolutely. Yeah. And I've recently had a very similar experience with a cousin who's getting ready to have, I forget if it's cataract surgery or something, so she's not able to do a whole lot of reading. And I read an entire book to her, and we've been talking about it, and it's been a great way to rekindle the relationship as well. So yeah, there's lots of stuff in here like that. About memorization. Are you a memorizer?
No, I kind of wish that I were. I mean, not to the extent of the folks in this article that, seem to have memorized whole books. Yes. And that's what they spent their time doing, to where they seem to have gotten an exemption from prayer other than once a month.
Once a month.
So that they could focus on that. I kind of wish that I were better at pulling up favorite quotes or passages, because I do like having the idea of having that come to mind when it applies versus just the vague, oh, I think I remember something about that. I admire people who have bits of poetry or favorite lines from books memorized, but I've never been very good at memorizing passages. Oh, they
My
slip away too
grandparents,
quick.
yeah, my grandparents in their 70s could still recite the poetry they learned back in school. Yeah.
Mm,
This is a kind of a review essay, this article. So the second
yeah.
book that she's writing about is by Adrian Johns called The Science of Reading, which she thinks kind of obviously she thinks it pairs well with the first one, which is about the how do we read and some science stuff. How did that hit you? What stuck out about that, the second half of the essay?
I find it interesting, but also a little bit scary. I don't like to scientificize my reading to where they're like, here are ways we could optimize reading, because that starts to make me feel more like just a computer program or, a biological program versus a random human being. But I find it fascinating to learn the study of what do your eyes do? How can we make this more efficient? What are the hardest letters to read? Should we get rid of them in the alphabet? So that we can make it just flow much more smoothly. And I don't necessarily share those goals, but I did find the part of the article you know interesting because I'd kind of like to learn more, while at the same time a little bit scary because you know metrics frighten me
Yeah,
just a little
no,
bit.
it's a book that I would be because it has the word science in the title is less interesting to me, but she wrote about it in an interesting way.
Yeah.
The
Well,
most fascinating thing I thought in what this book reviewer wrote about it is that reading is not innate. Like
mm,
it's not something
yeah, that's right.
it doesn't exist in all the cultures, and that's something I never had thought of. That unlike speaking and language and eating and all that stuff, there's nothing physiologically predetermined about reading, about having a written language. And that's interested me. I don't know if I have
Yeah.
anything to say about it other beyond the fact that it kind of captured my imagination, but it did.
Yeah, that it's an invention. Of course, words are inventions too, but it seems like the act of communicating via sound and such is pretty universal. In fact,
Universal.
from the sound of this, all universal with
Right.
humanity. But reading, I mean, not every, it's not just that not everybody in a particular society can read, aren't literate. It's that
Right.
there are civilizations who have not
There's
read,
no
had no way of writing or reading. That I did find that interesting, and it makes me wonder sometimes how, I do believe that communication and words shape the way we see the world, and and I think that's what the other part of the book is talking about. How I have been a reader, and the various spaces that I've entered because of that have shaped me. How would I be if I didn't have that? Or how would our society be if we didn't have that? I don't know.
these are big questions above my pay grade, as they say.
But yeah, I still much preferred the ideas of the first one, while realizing that this is a great pairing. Um, Even if it starts to get me just a little bit like, ooh, I don't know if I need to optimize the speed at which I read a book to such a degree. And
Oh
that
no, I'm
seems
not
like,
interested in
yeah.
anything like that. No, no, no.
And
Speed
maybe that was
reading?
just
Ugh.
and maybe that was just a little piece of this. I did find it interesting the various ways they said to change punctuation. That periods and things like that actually inhibit some, can actually slow us down, and not just slow, but maybe slow our comprehension too. And so they thought maybe the varying spaces between words would actually work better.
Instead of in lieu of
But
punctuation.
I'm certainly not going to be the one who leads a charge to change any of that. I can't imagine. She does have a final section here where she talks about Wayne Booth, kind of a famous literary critic. One of his first things that he wrote in 1960 and published in the Journal of Developmental Reading. It's after E.B. White confessed recently, with no apparent shame, that he is a slow reader. And so Wayne Booth said, I sincerely pitied him. Since I am a very fast reader myself, the pity didn't strike me until 3 seconds of reading time later when I was reading something else. But when it struck, it struck hard. I think I read White's statement in the New Yorker sometime during the last 6 months, about 2/3 of the way down the far right-hand column. With the photographic memory I have developed in learning to read so fast, I can see White's statement exactly where it fell on the page. I mean, he's being satirical and playful, but I think that kind of wraps around, the manuscript stuff that we talked about, the visual act
Absolutely.
of reading, and then this desire to optimize. I thought it was a fantastic way to end this article.
It definitely was. I agree with you wholeheartedly. And for me, it evoked this thing, made me think about this thing, weird thing about me as a reader. I am very much of a slow reader, and I do not have a photographic memory, but I can usually remember if I'm looking for a quote in a book, I usually remember it's either in the right or the left, and the top and the bottom.
Mm.
I retain that memory for a long time after I've read it. So, what is that? Quasi photographic memory? But
you
that struck me.
you should start engraving your books as you read them, like the medieval monks did. That will further solidify all of these
You
things.
obviously haven't seen any of my drawings, Trevor, because that would really decrease the value of the book. This has been a delight as always, Trevor. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sean.